Very much for being here and taking your time to come down and listen to what we're trying to get done, or trying to get to a point to decide whether we want to move forward with this or not. The purpose of the meeting is a casual presentation of what has been done, what is being done, and where we're going, where we hope to go. We've got some answers for you. I'm sure you're going to have questions. We're not fully ready to go, so anyone that thinks that we're going to break ground tomorrow, we're nowhere close to it. We are doing a lot of different things at one time to try and get to a point to where if we want to move forward, it's the quickest possible time that we can move forward. I am of the opinion that this is probably the best economic development project that we could be doing that will affect and make the South Padre economy healthy across the board. It will affect hospitality field, it will affect restaurants, hotels, motels, bars, shops, and I think it'll trickle down to just about anyone that has any kind of a business here in some form or another. I want to introduce the South Padre Island Convention Center Planning Committee. Joni Clark, our city manager, is on it. Lacey Eckberg, the Convention Visitors Director, is on it. Paul Cunningham, our city attorney. Kathy Cunningham from the City Attorney's Office. Sam Liskey, council member. Robert Fudge, council member. Cesar Cantor from the Pearl, General Manager of the Pearl South Padre, and Bill Donahue, General Manager of the Eastern Grand Resort. Gilbert Gallegos, architect with Broadus and Associates, our consultants, and Diana Bravo Gonzalez, also an architect and consultant with Broadus and Associates. Members of the council that are here, I know Joanne Evans, our Mayor Pro Tem, is here, sitting in the back, close to the door. Alex Avalos, Bob Fudge is here, and Sam Liskey is here, and I believe that's it. I also sit on the planning committee. Want to get one thing out of the way as soon as before we start, and that is that a lot has been asked about, and rightfully so, concerning the nature trail and the Wailing Wall, the Wailing Wall. I see no reason why the nature trail is going to be bothered at all. We don't have any land to that side to develop, so I don't expect the nature trail to be bothered at all. There may be some disruption during the period of time that the building is being renovated, because this is going to be in several phases, of which renovation is the first one, or one of them. And as far as the Wailing Wall is concerned, I have made contact with the Wailing Foundation. I've spoken to them. Unfortunately, Wailing, no way we could get him down here as much as we wanted to. But the wall is going to stay. I don't know how the word got out that it was not going to stay. We actually have all intentions of trying to add to it if we can. The problem is that Weiland is not doing these anymore, or if he is, he really has to set aside some time. We got instructions on how to make it look better. They want us to use local artists, and I got some instructions on that as well. So those two items are off the table insofar as being bothered or being fooled with. They will stay, and I don't see any reason why they shouldn't. And like I said, I would like to see the wall enhanced. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Gilbert Gallegos, our consultants with Broadus and Associates. They've got I don't have their resume with me, but I can assure you that they're very well qualified. Gilbert.
By the way, we'll turn it over to questions and answers after the presentation, if you don't mind. So we can get through that, get you all the information, and then we can open it up.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. I'm Gilbert Gallegos. I'm an architect and with Broadus and Associates, and I'm Senior Vice President we were retained by the city of South Padre Island to be your project coordinating consultant and owner's designated rep as we kind of work through this particular process. First process is we call the pre-development planning process, and this is the phase we're currently in terms of analyzing the progress of the project, programming, costs, and so forth. And the next step is the execution. We've gone through procurement where we've actually hired some professionals to work with us on this particular project, running parallel in terms of the feasibility analysis. And I want to kind of turn over the mic and let Raymond Janak, the architect, we're currently negotiating. We don't have a signed contract with them. They're here at their own, I'll let you, Raymond, introduce your team here, but they're here at their own pleasure.
Thank you. My name is Raymond Janak with Janak Architects. We have offices in Harlingen and Corpus Christi. This is Rob Swedberg. He's with TBS Design. They probably do more convention centers than anybody, not only in the country but in the world. And David Monreal with Janak and Associates, who is also from our Harlingen office.
Thank you, Raymond. And in our next group, as we have Spa Glass Contractors, they're our CM at Risk contractor, and I'll turn over to Michael.
My name is Mike Rayleigh. I'm a project executive with Spa Glass out of the Harlingen office. I've got Clayton Frady. Clayton will be the project manager on the project. Look forward to getting this project kicked off.
Thank you, Michael. And we have another important person within our organization that lives in Los Fresnos and been very actively involved in this process. Introduce yourself.
I'm Diana Bravo Gonzalez. I'm an architect and project manager with Rodison Associates.
Thank you, Ms. Diana. And I think the first big question everyone has is in terms of the overall project, whether we can actually afford it. And we have Mr. Dave Gordon here with Estrada Nabosa that will be leading the presentation on the financial aspect of this particular project. David? Dave.
Thank you. Again, my name is Dave Gordon. I'm with a company called Estrada Hinojosa. We are the city's financial advisor and have been so since 1992. A little bit about our firm. We're a Texas-based firm, have 4 offices in Texas and a number of offices across the country. And basically what we do is we represent cities, counties, school districts, all kinds of public entities to basically help them figure out how to finance projects that they desire. So that's our role with the city. If the city wants to, for example, finance the fire station or finance the Birding Nature Center or any of those types of projects, then we help them, working with your bond counsel, which is McCall, Parkinson, Horton, help them figure out what is a viable way to finance that project and then take that project to the market. Again, we've been doing this since 1992 and have a long and a very great relationship with the city. So what I'm going to do, my task here today basically is just to talk about a little bit about the project finances, and this is a very preliminary at this particular point. Obviously, you're still in the development efforts in terms of trying to figure out exactly what you'd want to build, and the numbers will change, but I want to give everybody a comfort that, that the project, at least as it's currently envisioned, is something that the city can afford, and I'll go through that a little bit. First, I want to talk very briefly about market conditions, and again, we'll open up to questions later and entertain any questions that you may have. But needless to say, everybody probably knows this, that market conditions in terms of where interest rates are extremely low. So if you have a project that's viable and you have the revenues, this is a great time actually to enter the markets and to finance those projects. Just very briefly, a couple of slides. You can see a long-term indication of where market rates have been since 2000, or over the last 20 years. I'm going to change this view here.
Can you maximize that screen
also?
Yes.
And these, some of these slides are going to be a little difficult to see, but I'm told they'll be posted to the city's website. So after the presentation, if I didn't answer any of your questions, feel free to go and study those on that particular, on the city's website. Really the takeaway from this particular graph, and everybody knows this, is that we've gone through a period where rates have been going down for a considerable period of time. We did go through it towards the right-hand side of the screen. during the 2008-2009 period, and obviously during the financial crisis where the markets were very turbulent, but rates have continued to trail down, and at least in the foreseeable future, is a very good time to access the markets if you have a financeable project. A little bit on the yield curve. Basically, folks probably know that a shorter term loan generally you pay a lower rate than a longer term loan. This is just a kind of an indication of where rates have been this year, then a year ago, and then last month. And again, the takeaway here really is that rates are incredibly low, particularly on the short end of the yield curve. That's really tied to what's going on with the Federal Reserve and their policy. And as you probably know, basically the Fed funds target rate right now is from 0 to 0.25%. So until that changes, the short end of the yield curve is pretty much going to be fixed at very extremely low rates. The longer end of the yield curve is really governed more by what's going on in the marketplace in general, expectations about inflation, how the economy is doing and all that. So we'll probably see that pick up over the next number of years, but right now, again, extremely low rates. And the final thing on the market, just to give you kind of a snapshot where we are, if we look back to 2000, and each of these vertical lines represents kind of the range of interest rates for that particular maturity, a 1 year, 2 year, 5 year, etc. During that period of time, the box in the center of the green box represents the average of where the rates have been, and then the orange diamond at the bottom represents where we are today. Last month we actually were at the bottom for that entire period of time. Now we're slightly off the bottom, but still incredibly low rates. So again, that helps finance any project with the revenues that you have. So now I want to talk a little bit about your hotel occupancy tax, kind of the history of what you have used it for, and then I'll go into a little bit later just the viability of doing this financing again given the fact that this is very preliminary and knowing what we know today. The city right now levies an 8.5% hotel occupancy tax. First and foremost, that tax, those monies that are levied, can only be used for basically tourism-related, convention center-type related activities to promote economic development. But it has to be, it's a very narrowly defined purpose for that. So it can't be used to pave streets, it can't be used to, unless it was related to the convention center itself, it can't be used to put in new sewage lines or whatever. It's pretty narrow in terms of what its use is. By statute, 0.5% or a half a penny of that has to be used for beach erosion. The rest of that 8% can be pledged as a revenue pledge against bonds that you could issue, for example, like in this case, to actually finance the construction or renovation of the project. And you can see then the history of your hotel occupancy tax revenue back to 2002. Some ups and some downs, and you did have some rate changes. Started off in 2002 at 7%. You can see it was in 2003 it was raised to 7.5%, and in 2009 to 8.5% where you are today. And that's currently the maximum that you're allowed to levy. And you can see, obviously, during Hurricane Dolly, which also happened to correspond with kind of with the recession, you did have a year where your revenue went down significantly. But in general, your revenue has grown over this period of time. And over the last 3 years, from 2009 to 2012, in fact, it's actually grown at a compounding growth rate of 10.3%. So pretty significant growth the last number of years. I also just kind of mentioned that during this same period of time, the property values on the island have almost tripled. And your sales tax revenue has almost doubled during this particular period of time. So, obviously there's been a lot going on at the island. Economic development has been critical, and everybody on the island, I think, has benefited from that rising boat in terms of that activity. Just a little bit briefly in terms of the convention center itself right now, in terms of the financing activities that have gone on in the past. Back in 1990, you may recall, some of the folks that have lived here for a while, you had issued $10 million in certificates of obligation to build the current facility. The certificates of obligation, that's another financing vehicle that opened to cities, basically had both a property tax pledge as well as a pledge of these particular hotel occupancy tax revenues. The hot revenues were actually what was used, but that was the mechanism we used previously. What we're going to be talking about today is basically using only hotel occupancy taxes without any type of property tax pledge. And that's what we'll present here shortly. So again, those $10 million were issued in 1990. You did a couple of refinancings, actually, which is something we look at all the time to basically refinance something for savings. And then all your debt was paid off on 3/1 of 2012. So last year, the final balance of that debt was paid off. So there's no debt that's outstanding right now related to the current facility. And in terms of the actual debt service, the principal and interest payments that you were making along that way since 1990, initially that was $1 million a year approximately, and then through the refinancings that we did the last number of years, it was about $800,000 a year. So and this is going to be hard to see, and again, I'm just going to talk maybe at a high level. In the back, if you can read that. We'll make sure that this goes on your website, but I just want to talk about the affordability of the project. Again, with a lot of things unknown at this particular point, right now we're talking about a $30 million project. And that's the budget that's been given to us. Again, a number of things to be decided. If we look at your hotel occupancy tax revenue, about $6.5 million this year is what we expect. About $6.2 million of that can be pledged to these bonds. And again, there's a limited amount of things you can do with that revenue. It can only be used for this type of activity. So by issuing bonds, what we're doing is we're pledging those future revenues. We're making it so that you can do something today with revenues that are coming in the future. It's like when you build a house, you're really pledging your future earning potential, against that mortgage. This is the same idea. If you tried to finance it with cash, then or pay for it with cash, you would never get the convention center that hopefully that you need in the area. So the way we have this structure right now, again, I'm not going to go through all the numbers too much because obviously you guys can't see that. It certainly is affordable. We've got this structure so that you've got about, depending upon the growth rate, about $5 million left after debt service in the first couple of years, and then depending upon, again, how the revenue grows over time, $6.5 million under this scenario, which assumes very moderate growth of about 3% for the first number of years, 3% a year in terms of revenue growth. Showed a couple of other scenarios where we, for example, this is kind of a stress test where we're not showing any growth. At a no growth scenario, the minimum revenue would be about $4.3 million a year after debt service. And then finally, the next page is just a kind of a higher growth scenario. Again, this will be available on the website. These numbers were also run with current market rates, which again are very, very attractive, but I've added about 50 basis points or 0.5% to basically make sure that by the time you go to the market, obviously we can't control what happens, but hopefully the market will be similar situation as is today. So I think that's what I'm going to cover right now. If there's any questions, obviously I'll be able to address those later. I do want to assure you, though, that you do have the capacity to finance this project. Our job, again, is to help you bring that to market to make sure that you can pay for it. We put the appropriate measures in place to make sure that there's reserve funds, for example, and things of that nature, and that there's appropriate coverage so that you should be able to finance this. Because it would be a new credit, but I'm expecting it would be about an 8 credit, and certainly something that is affordable if the city so deems it to move forward with the project.
Thanks, Dave. Now we're going to go over a presentation that's going to identify the needs, what's the process, market conditions, giving you some additional information with regard to where we're at in the overall process of the project. Get this to the largest slide here. Okay. The goals of the convention center is one of the biggest issues currently you have is the update of your current existing facility. It's 20 plus years old. It's really in bad shape, and we're going to provide a little more detail about that. But that is a goal. Regardless of what happens with regard to the convention center, something has to be done with the existing convention center. Otherwise, it'll probably deteriorate over time. So we're gonna provide some insight on that. There has been some studies. We obviously want to do what's best for South Padre Island in terms of creating the highest economic impact, and we can certainly provide some. We're going to provide some information on what that impact is also. And as Dave mentioned, there is not going to be any tax impact or implications to the taxpayers as it relates to this particular project. The overall process, we started off and with regard to just collecting information, we have several reports in terms of data that's happened. There was an existing facility assessment done by a local architectural firm in the name of ROFA, out of Harlingen, that did an existing facility assessment for the building. We have some more detailed information that Deanna's going to highlight. But there are some implications currently that need to take place ASAP in terms of some emergency items. And those are items that we've identified that needs to happen in terms of water infiltration, and some problems with the roof, and we're going to get a little more detail on that. But this information has helped us be able to evaluate what needs to happen in terms of moving forward. So we do have some emergency items. As part of the overall process, there was some question in terms of the site. We looked at the possibility of looking at other locations besides the current existing location. We looked at several greenfield sites, and basically they were all running about $10 million in terms of purchasing new property that would fulfill the new convention center site and expansion. So that was a fairly costly item as you kind of roll this into the overall performance. Currently, you have a ground lease with the county. It has a remaining, about 30 years left, Paul?
50-year renewal.
And a 50-year renewal in terms of the overall ground lease. So there is no additional cost to the city in terms of using that property, so why not take advantage of it? And obviously there's going to be some economic benefit as far as that goes. As part of our exercise, we all looked at some additional finance options. We looked at, currently there's some legislation that allows for public-private partnerships. We did take a look at that option. We did take a look at some lease purchase in terms of bringing the private developer in to actually do this development themselves, manage it, and operated. But we felt like the revenue issuance that Dave just spoke about was probably the best bang for the dollars in terms of taking advantage of the lowest interest rates in terms of moving forward. We also went through a procurement process in terms of hiring the firm of Raymond Janak and his team, and obviously the contractor. But we also have some geotechnical procurement that took place, and an environmental consultant that's looking in terms of the wetland and environmental issues as it relates to the site. So we do have those particular individuals on board. As I mentioned, we do have some studies that have been completed. The first one that was completed in 2005. This is a fairly large document, and it's going to be downloaded on the website as well. But this is a feasibility and master plan study for the convention center that was done by C.H. Johnson back in 2005. There is some good information in terms of projections with regard to that particular plan that was done in 2005, and of course that was done pre-Dolly, so there has to be some adjustments that needed to take place. As I mentioned, there was the assessment done by ROFA. We have the wetland determination by HDR, that's their South Padre Island's current environmental consultant out of Corpus Christi. And we did hire a local Amtech Building Sciences company to look at the roofing issues. There are some warranty items that the current, that roof was replaced here recently that are being addressed, but there are some other issues related to water infiltration that we're going to highlight. Let me just kind of give you a snapshot of where we're at in terms of the current convention center. It is outdated. The minimum size in the Johnson report and in the current marketplace is that there needs to be, or should be, at least 30,000 square feet minimum for an exhibit hall. Currently, your existing exhibit hall is 22,000 square feet, so it's outdated. It was built 20 years ago, and that was a different situation altogether, but all current studies show that larger facilities actually draw more people and have a preference in terms of size. There is no ballroom. Most new facilities have ballrooms, and this one does not. No breakout rooms. There are some operational inefficiencies in terms of the existing facility. They're having some electrical problems. There's much more efficient lighting now, like LED lighting, higher efficient chillers and so forth. So there is a lot of inefficiencies in terms of operations, which obviously adds some cost in terms of the operation of the facility. So there is water infiltration that's occurring on the exterior perimeter walls. That we have about $4 million set aside in the budget to deal with water infiltration. There's going to have to be some investigation that needs to take place on those walls to see what the extent of that damage is. But we're assuming the worst case situation in terms of replacing all the exterior walls for that particular facility. So that is a big issue. There are some code deficiencies in terms of wind. That was built 20 years ago. We have higher wind requirements these days in terms of the code requirements. So it is outdated also in terms of technology. Technology is a very important element in terms of exhibit halls, new conventions, in terms of presentations and so forth, and that currently is not in place with your current convention center. The economic impact that's taking place on the average about 63,000 attendees per year, an impact of $30 million to the local economy in terms of currently the average that's taking place on the convention center. But as part of the Johnson report in terms of increasing just due to the size and the recommendation, we would have about 97,000 attendees on average in about 5 years. That would have an impact of $45 million. So that's a net increase of $15 million per year of economic impact over a period of time. What are the trends in terms of convention centers? As we all know, technology has a big impact in terms of the technology. There's a lot of instant gratification in terms of technology, wanting information right away, exchanging information right away. Younger generations are so adept to using computers, iPhones, social media, communicating, text messaging, and so forth. But people want it now. So technology is a very important element in terms of convention centers in the future. And some of the trends, this was a report done in Las Vegas at the current last 2012-20 convention. They're looking for hybrid events, which blends both physical and virtual sessions in terms of exhibits and other experiences. They obviously want technology to transform the delegate experience, technology in terms of AV and so forth, streaming from one place to another. There's a lot of entertainment components in terms of the location, such as music, restaurants, recreation, and family-friendly events. So there is a lot of that taking place currently in terms of the attraction coming down to South Padre Island. Shorter, to-the-point meetings, fresh, healthy food, and good value in terms of trends. So that's kind of in summary what we're talking about in terms of trends. Now we're going to get down to the facts in terms of the convention center. I'm going to turn it over to Deanna.